thank you all for being here today. It's really amazing to see a room full of government leaders to hear about our services. So my goal for my presentation today is, on one hand, give a little bit of an intro into the Amazon Web Services, more telling you where Amazon came from. I mean, after all, we're a bookshop. What the hell are we doing in actually providing you also other services? Talking a bit about some of our customers. Indeed, I'll focus more on non-government customers, because actually we have a stellar group of presenters later on that actually will give you really deep insight into how government agencies at this moment are already using cloud services. So they do a much better job at that than I will. I'll talk a bit about some of the Amazon services, but then drive mainly into what are actually the key success factors behind Amazon's success in this world. Giving you a bit in sort of what is the key differentiators between what I think Amazon delivers and what other cloud providers may deliver. So coming to Amazon in reality is three very different businesses. On one hand, there's the retail business, in which I hope you're all a customer, and the one that you probably know best. But there's also a second business. It's called the Amazon seller business. On one hand, you maybe ever been exposed to that, because that's the third parties selling on Amazon.com or one of our other international websites. But it's also an enterprise services platform. It runs some of the world's largest e-commerce operations next to that of Amazon.com. So Target.com was part of that, but also Marks and Spencer's, Mothercare, a whole range of the world's largest e-commerce operations. And as you can imagine, the technologies that we needed to develop for such an enormous platform, which is much larger than Amazon.com itself, required unique technology development. Things that we couldn't buy. Or believe me, if we could have bought them, we would have. Yeah, because we're just an efficient operation as any other organization. And for us, we started to develop these technologies out of a necessity. And after a while, after a number of years, really building out this expertise, we saw that we had really unique technologies at our hands that helped our own organization move really fast. One of the core principles within Amazon.com is really time to market is always critical. If we have an idea, if we have an innovation in mind, we really want to move very fast. And so we built lots of technologies around that to enable that. So when we developed these technologies for real large-scale development, we decided to open that up to the rest of the world to use as well, because we believed that one of the things that was holding innovation back outside of Amazon was not having access to a similar platform as that Amazon.com had. Yeah, that there was maybe even just a kid in a dorm room in Dartmouth who could have in his mind the next Google or the next Amazon.com. But the only thing that would be holding him back would be access to a really scalable, on-demand infrastructure at low cost. So that became the mission of what we now know as the Amazon Web Services. Yeah, to enable businesses and developers to use web services, what we now know as cloud, to build scalable, sophisticated applications. And initially, when we launched these services, that was really probably more focused on younger businesses, on really to help entrepreneurs and innovators get off the ground. It took only 2 months for enterprises to figure out that this was way too good a deal for them as well. And as forever since, this has been developing in a very rapid pace. Fortunately, we're not a company that delivers these services as very, let's say, in the traditional way of enterprise IT. We deliver them simple and humble, and then really quickly work with our customers very rapidly to drive these services in the direction where they want these products to go. So given that these are very new services, it allowed us to build services that were really exactly developed to meet our customers' needs. So by now, hundreds of thousands of businesses are our customers running on this platform in 190 countries around the world. Yeah, so this is really, in 5 years' time, has really taken off. And it has really helped many of these companies develop products and go to market in ways that they couldn't have done before. Part of that, of course, has also been the US government. And I like to pull up this quote from Vivek when the first service was launched on AWS. He put out a blog post. And what amazed me most was that the wording in that blog post was exactly the mission that we had, Amazon Web Services had as well. Yeah? To free customers, such that they could focus on mission critical tasks instead of purchasing, configuring, maintaining redundant infrastructure. The thing what we call muck. Yeah? The things that everybody has to do, but that creates no differentiation. Yeah? The undifferentiated heavy lifting. And so by now, we're really proud that more than 100 agencies are AWS customers. And these are only a few of them. And I'm amazed by the logos of each of these agencies, and I really like to collect them. And so I'm up to, I need to get the other, 94 that I'm still missing here. Yeah. Then let's look at a few other sort of enterprise style customers. This New York Times in 2009, largely driven by their own data centers, moved over to AWS EC2, and now more than 40% of their infrastructure is running in the cloud. But if you look at the cost picture, only 25% of that cost actually goes to these cloud services. So there's a dramatic reduction in cost, while at the same time they get a level of agility in being able to grow and shrink their infrastructure that they did not have before. Look at SAP as a very respectable enterprise services and software company themselves, are internally big users of AWS. And as you can see, there's a whole range of different patterns, whether it's training and workshop and dev and test, and that they're using it for. And internally, they're very big users of cloud services. And this is actually a slide from SAP themselves, kind of indicating towards their customers, what the cost savings are in a traditional manner versus running it in the cloud. Yeah? SAP, as well as Oracle and most of the other large enterprise services companies, are all great partners here. Another company, and often we think about these things as, where things slowly move into the cloud. But this, on the other hand, is Advanced Innovation. They're a global supply chain company that actually runs all of their infrastructure in the cloud. And all of the pieces that they run in the cloud are all standard enterprise software components. Yeah, so it's all Oracle and Microsoft software, and they run a traditional multi-stack infrastructure, but all of these pieces, they are running inside AWS. And actually, they've gone a few steps further in using traditional software, in this case Oracle's data card, to hook up multiple regions around the world, such that they are serving their European customers out of the European region and backing that up into a US region. So if ever Ireland would disappear off the map of the earth, yeah, they can redirect their European customers to use their US data, to use the US region. All of that using standard off-the-shelf components. This is, I think, what many organizations, and maybe also at agencies, or maybe not in government, maybe only in enterprises, how the interaction between business units and IT is. Yeah? Many of our customers I've talked to over the years have described that many of the business units would see them as a blocker. Yeah? And they don't want to be the blocker. But forever, CIOs have been given the task that the most important thing for them is to cut cost. The only way to do that is to make very long-term contracts, to reduce choice, and to have very standardized offerings for everyone to use, even though at this moment, business needs to become way more agile, needs to move much faster. Competition is increasing. There's an abundance of products in the market. And consumer choice is changing rapidly what software is being selected. There is a new group of leaders coming into the enterprise that has a very different view of software. They're used on software on their mobile phones and their devices, where they decide that if they don't like this app at this moment anymore, they'll throw it off, and even though they just paid $5 for it, and get another one that is just a little bit better. complete control over your software environment. These leaders are coming into the enterprise and being completely amazed that it's actually the IT department that dictates what software they shall use. Yeah, and I think this is a very common problem in many organizations. And I've even heard a new term being called stealth cloud, where it's actually the business units that are going out and buying cloud services. And I think many IT organizations are realizing that, the only way for them to become more agile is to actually, engage with their business units much more deeper, or let them even run, let them be the leaders in the acquisitions of the technologies. So an example there is, for example, PBS. Yeah, and this is actually, I stole a few slides from a PBS presentation, because this is a great story. Yeah, PBS turns out to be, on the web, actually the major property that customers go to online. To look at, if you look at any of the networks, 2 of the PBS sites actually outrank all other networking sites. And these are small letters for you guys to read. Most importantly, in their story is that they were completely self-hosted. It's an organically growing application where, they had no separation between the different sites that they were running. And customers were extremely frustrated. And actually on one of the slides it says, producers hated the restrictions. And the producers were the guys that actually were running programs and wanted to move very fast with their program. Some of them wanted to do new things online, new integrations between their programs and online experience of their customers that they couldn't do because this was one organically growing thing. So they moved onto AWS and actually run all of their operations out of AWS at this moment in a completely separate environment where each of their business units, each of their producers now has complete control over their environment. And so it allows them to not only help their internal customers be more self-sufficient and run at the pace that they want to run at, but it also allows them to build a whole new range of products that were not able to be done before. Many of them award-winning new products. And this is a quote for John Wenzel, which is the VP of Products, who actually said that, where infrastructure was a blocker, was an obstacle before, it now has turned into an asset. Because it allows them to move at the speed of business, instead of that the business has to move at the speed of IT. Yeah, so for that, IT becomes the enabler, becomes the partner. And we are really proud to have put out a whole range of services that helps businesses completely transform the way that IT interacts with the business. Another example here is Nasdaq. Nasdaq is a very traditional enterprise example in this case. So Nasdaq, the data group at Nasdaq is responsible for archiving all information that comes from the exchanges, puts it in a very large archiving system. And but they sometimes were getting requests from customers for historical data. Can you give me Amazon, everything from Amazon between 10:20 and 10:30 last year at September 21? And of course, given that this was an archiving system, they had to put out a massive ad hoc request against the database. It would take half an hour to complete. They would give it back to the customer, and the customer says, yeah, but what I really wanted was... And so they decided that there may be a business to be had here. But they looked at their own infrastructure and decided, first made a plan, and for that they had to rehaul their whole back-end system. A multi-million-dollar operation that would take 2 or 3 years to complete at least, probably would fail. But for an application for which they did not know whether it was going to be successful. So they took a road that was so simple. They decided to store all the information that we're getting from the exchanges also in Amazon S3. And then they built an application that would run on the customers' desktops. So they would be using their CPUs, they would be using Amazon storage. And by the time that these guys launched, they were out of pocket $500. Yeah? And if this application was not going to be a success, yeah, that would be about the liability that they run into. Turns out it's a massive success. And even to the point you can go to data.nasdaq.com, download the application and play with it. Now even to the point that it's become such a success that the Nasdaq realizes that all this data that they've collected in Amazon S3 is actually a great new asset. And they've started to put an API on top of it, such that everybody else can start developing applications on top of this platform as well, giving them a whole new revenue stream. So these are actually sort of the short list of common use cases. And actually, if I look at this list, I'm asking myself, what else is left there? Yeah. And there's many other cases, actually more extreme cases of use of the platform. But these are sort of the common ones. Definitely data analysis is one that is heating up at the moment. The sort of the combination between what we call big data, yeah, collecting large amounts of data to create a competitive advantage for your business or to create better insight into your customers, is definitely something that is heating up at the moment. And cloud is really enabling that, because this kind of data analysis requires no limits in their resource usage. Every new business that I see that is being started at the moment, by the way, all has as the core part of their business a data analytics component. Continuously measuring and evaluating what your customers are doing to continuously improve what you do. And often at the same time I'm thinking about, is this data that I'm collecting maybe also an additional revenue stream that I can be using? And I see that that particular behavior is switching into the enterprises as well. New programs that are being launched, new products that are being developed, all have a data analytics component to them. And so as such, cloud is a really important player there, because we easily enable that for our customers. So just to quickly recap the advantages, no capex, yeah, low variable pricing, meaning that it shifts towards variable. Of course, if you no longer have to pay anything up front, it shifts towards being an operational cost. More importantly, the fact that we give you this elasticity, that these services can be acquired and released on demand, means that you have an opportunity to not only shift it to OpEx, but to actually drive the OpEx down as well. Only pay for what you use, completely self-service infrastructure, which is important for me. There's a large automation component there. If I remember back to Amazon, let's say 6-7 years ago, when we didn't have these facilities for ourselves, I thought we were really good in terms of delivering servers and services to our internal customers. It would take about a few hours. You could go to a website, you fill in your request for capacity, and in a few hours' time, you will get this capacity completely delivered to your doorstep. However, it turns out that didn't motivate our engineers enough to actually also release capacity when they no longer needed it. And so one of the key insights that we had, first of all, that these resources needed to be able to be delivered on minutes notice and not on hours notice. But also that we needed to automate it. Because if we could allow automation to happen of these resources, then it could be business rules that would be driving the increase and the decrease of capacity, instead of that engineers were in charge, who often may have had a more emotional attachment to the capacity that they were having. Oh, believe me, on end of the fourth quarter, we've gone through the shopping season, and many teams would have received more hardware or more service before the holiday season started. And then on January 1st, you would start talking to them and say, why are you guys not releasing any the capacity that you got? And they would say, well, just because, we have to do this thing in March. And we thought, why not just hang on to it? Yeah. And so you have to change that behavior, and you can change that behavior by putting mechanisms into place. And in this case, that's fully automation of it, so that you can have the business rules decide how capacity should be allocated. Of course, it needs to be really elastic, it needs to be easy, it needs to be on a minute's notice, or immediately you need to be able to get that new volume, or immediately you need to put in a request for a new database, and that database needs to be up and running within a few minutes, because that's how this stuff should work. And all of that should lead to organizations being less constrained in their thinking. I think most of the time to market, on one hand, of course, comes really out of the mechanisms and the tools, but it also comes out of the fact that mentally you are no longer constrained by physical resources. And you can drive innovation in any direction because you know that if this stuff becomes really popular, or if there's something that changes your resource requirements, you can just go. Wouldn't it be the first time that an organization actually decided that for this particular application we need 12 very large instances? Yeah? And after they've been running it, it turns out that 12 large instances is not at all what they actually needed. They needed 24 small ones and be able to scale up and down. But imagine if you would have bought hardware for that. You would have been stuck with that. Yeah, and so many of these things, it allows you to make mistakes much easier and then correct those mistakes very rapidly. So, if you look at those examples, and often, they're being asked, what about virtualization? Isn't that just on-premise virtualization? Doesn't give you the same things? And I think it's easier to look at the check marks here. I think, there's lots of good use of on-premise virtualization. If your organization is not using virtualization, whether it's CPU or storage virtualization, you should. Yeah? And it will definitely help you transition to the cloud much faster. But you do not get any of the benefits. Don't kid yourself in that. Except for maybe, that is more of a self-service environment, but you are still holding all of the cost. Yeah? And you are still in charge of making these things reliable. And still in charge of making sure that they're spread over multiple data centers, such that your customers are actually can create a highly available application on top of it. So the Amazon services by now is sort of a cloud of services. You'll see other slides today where maybe they are more stacked, but I've become to the realization that this model that we had early on, which is infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service, was just a model. Because if I look at what many of our customers do, they may be running a small ERP system in Amazon EC2, run off some homegrown applications next to it, will drop some Java code in Amazon Beanstalk. They may be building a website in Ruby using Heroku, and they're using a collection of services at all times. And especially if I look at the whole range of new mobile applications that are being developed, which include geolocation services, maybe some telco services, they'll use recommendation services, they'll do integration with social networks. All of these become sort of part of the Amazon cloud. And so the Amazon cloud is much more than just the set of Amazon Web Services. It definitely includes many of our partners also here in the room, but there's a whole range of services on top of this platform that cannot be easily put in either a platform or a software as a service or data as a service or security as a service. All of these, I think all of these, you should see them more as a web or a cloud of services than purely layered, because customers will cross those layers because they have a job to do. So we have divided them up in regions around the world, 5 different regions, and these are the public cloud regions, 2 in the US, 1 in Europe, 2 in Asia. And each of those regions consists of what we call multiple availability zones. And an availability zone is, you should see that as a sort of a separate building, sitting in separate flood zones, separate seismographic areas, connected to different power grids, connected to different tier 1 networks, such that we can help our customers build applications that can survive the most extreme of failures and scenarios. And these availability zones are something that our customers get for free. Yeah, all of these components do not come at any additional cost. And of course, we now have also a 6th region, a region here in the US, which is dedicated to our US federal or actually what we call Gov Cloud for the US, which is for those of our customers that actually have ITAR requirements. If you look at the number of features, I think that we've released recently or that we've updated recently that are specifically in the enterprise space, I think some of them you guys might be interested in as well. I think Amazon Virtual Private Cloud is an extremely important tool for our customers to be able to extend their own data centers into the cloud, allowing you to cordon off a piece of the cloud, connect that piece back to your own data center, have full control over all the networking that is happening in that piece of the cloud. And at that moment, your own data center becomes capable of breathing in and breathing out. Because you suddenly, your own environment has become elastic. You'll hear many more of actually all the details of, for example, private cloud, but also the availability zones and things like that in many of the breakout sessions this afternoon. Amazon Direct Connect, AWS Direct Connect, allows you to actually have built MPLS circuits directly into the cloud if you need, for example, more secure transmissions, if you don't want to rely on the bandwidth that your internet connections give you, or if you have requirements that are around latency, guaranteed latency or guaranteed bandwidth, then it allows you to build direct connections into the Amazon cloud, both in US East and US West, and we'll roll this out to the rest of the world as well. We also launched something called Identity Federation, allowing you to actually federate your identity or those identities in your own identity system into the mechanisms that the Amazon cloud gives you. We allow you to import your own VMs, such that if you already had VMware VMs and you want to easily transfer those into the cloud, we give you the mechanism for that as well now. And recently we launched S3 server-side encryption for you to easily allow for encrypting data at rest inside Amazon S3. But, again, I'm just giving an overview of this. You'll get many more details, also in the talk from CJ Moses after me, about the security details, as well as all the tools that you get. Well, how popular is this? I think one of the metrics that we use is the number of objects in Amazon S3, which is our simple storage service. We've been measuring them year over year. More or less, they're a bit more than doubling each year. And when we measured in Q3 this year, all of these other measures are at the end of the year. We are already at 566 billion objects this year. So we're heading for strong growth still in this year. But more importantly, I want you to look at sort of the trend in this graph. Yeah, it's the trend of growing, I think, that is more important in this case. And I have this feeling, but it's just my intuition, that we haven't even hit the knee of the hockey stick yet, that the real explosion is just around the corner. And a system like Amazon S3, for example, does 370,000 storage transactions a second. Yeah, we roll in enough capacity on a daily basis. When Amazon.com, if you compare that, when Amazon.com was a $2.7 billion enterprise, which was around 2000, we roll this in on a daily basis. Of course, security and certification is really important for many of you. I won't spend that much time on it because CJ will do a marvelous job after me. I do want to put your attention to two documents that we have on our website. One that actually details all the security features of each of the services that we have, and also a document about compliance. Yeah, there are 43 common questions around compliance, and we answer them all in that document. And we've received quite a few certifications and worked hard to actually achieve them. For you folks, probably important, FISMA moderate. The IT compliant Gov Cloud, of course, is another side. And we continue to work with our customers to understand what kind of compliance regulations are important for you, what are the tasks that we can complete for you, such that you can actually get your job done. So if we look at what is actually, all these numbers are wonderful. What are actually the key drivers behind AWS's success? I like to believe that there are three things that set AWS aside from any other service provider. Yeah? First is flexibility, and I'll go into details of each of those. Yeah? Secondly is that we have a complete focus on continuously lowering cost. Yeah? We have lowered our cost more than a dozen times over the past 5 years. Yeah? And we'll continue to work on that. If our customers help us to create additional economies of scale, we will immediately turn around and let our customers benefit from that. And the third one is actually customer-driven innovation. And we'll dive in more detail of that. I think one of the things in the old style of IT that hurt us most in terms of flexibility was the fact that we were locked in. Yeah, the fact that the only way to create very long-term contracts with customers, or the only way to drive your cost down, is actually to create very long-term contracts. Yeah? And I think most of us have felt like, this big ball on your chain and on your leg, where, the contracts that you had made with vendors, while you actually wanted to get rid of them. And I believe that the new world of IT, where the customer is in control, means that as a provider, I continuously have to be on my toes. I need to provide continuously the absolute best service that you can expect of me, and otherwise you should walk away. I believe that should be the model. Yeah? Where you are in control. And we, as Amazon, as a service provider in this case, are very happy to give control over to you of this whole process. Now, of course, it's not that simple to walk away, but you should have the opportunity. Yeah? And you should be able to do so. It does mean that, we are making sure that you can run any software in the cloud that you want to run there. You are not locked into using any operating system. You're not locked into using any middleware. No programming language or whatever should restrict you from using the cloud. And all of these services, all of these operating systems are supported by their vendors on our platform. Yeah? This is all driven by most of these operating system vendors. For example, take the two largest enterprise software vendors. Oracle and SAP have certified all of their software for production on the AWS cloud. Yeah? With support coming from Oracle for their products running on the cloud. This is a complete partnership between many enterprise software vendors and AWS. And of course, there's a whole range of ISVs that is on our platform, and not even 5 slides will be enough to actually show all of these different ISVs. And again, the same goes for many of the system integrators. All of these are great partners on our platform. And especially if you look back at the previous slide, many of these help customers with managing their own data centers, as well as managing them in the cloud. Take, for example, BMC has a product called Blade Logic, and in Blade Logic you can manage AWS resources and Blades as if they are the same. So it gives you one management environment which you already had in your data center to manage all of these different resources. So for us it was really important. This point is, by the way, extremely important, because I do think that it sets Amazon aside from other providers. Yeah? The fact that we work very hard on making sure that you're not locked in to any technology that you're using. These services, as we've developed them, are by nature simple, such that it can never be the complexity of our services that locks you into using our platform. We will continue to work on keeping this very simple, such that you are in control of using us. Continuously lowering cost, a very important part. It actually, of course, comes a little bit out of our retail roots, where we really know how much cost is important to our customers, and where for a very long time we already had the principle that if we would be able to make additional cost reductions, then we would immediately turn around and lower our pricing, because we knew that that would be really important to our customers. And that's something that we do in AWS as well. So for example, beginning last July, given that we have a whole range of customers, for example, that are streaming a lot of video from AWS, we are now using so much bandwidth that we were able to negotiate much better bandwidth deals with our networking providers. And as a result of that, instead of pocketing that money, which maybe traditional enterprise IT software vendors often would do, we just turn around and immediately lower our pricing for our customers as well. We dropped the incoming bandwidth cost to 0, and some of our larger bandwidth users saw that month a 40% reduction in their bill. And our commitment is to continue to work on the scale of our platform such that we can help drive costs down. There's actually a number of different pricing models that we have. The on-demand model is, of course, most obvious, because that's the one where you acquire resources, you pay exactly for what you use. Some of our customers, however, told us that we're running 24/7, so this on-demand model doesn't really give us much. Yeah, and so we introduced something called reserved instances, which allows customers to make an upfront commitment, and in exchange for that, depending on the length of the commitment, we will drop the cost to 60 or 50% of the original cost of the instances. And then we introduced a third model, which caught most people a little bit off guard. It's called spot instances, where you as IT professional are allowed to set the price that you can use that you want to pay for the computation that you want to do. Yeah, this is something that's new. I mean, suddenly you have to think about, what is actually this job worth to me? How much am I actually willing to pay for it? And so we then maintain a spot price. If that spot price drops below the price that you've set, what you've bid for, we will run your computation. The price rises again, we take your computation away. So that's not for every kind of computation, but for example, there's quite a few customers in the data analytics space that are using this to drive that cost down tremendously. One of our partners, Cycle Computing, just launched a 30,000 core supercomputer instance on top of AWS for a bit more than $1,000 an hour, using the spot market. And actually, these models are really important because they are actually a driver behind how Amazon will forever be able to keep their costs down. So let's look a bit at a typical data center. This is a slide I got from James Hamilton, one of our data center architects and one of the smartest people in tech when it comes to these very large-scale environments. This is if you take all your cost, if you take all the cost in your data center and amortize that over a number of years, then this would be what looks like your monthly cost. Well, it is very surprising that a very large part of that is actually your server cost. Your hardware is still a very large piece of your monthly cost. Yeah, and so as always, if you want to change things for your customers, you have to follow the money. Yeah, and in this case, you see that power is actually a much smaller percentage of your monthly cost than that your servers are. So all the effort, yes, you can put a lot of effort in making all your energy green. But if you're then not using those electrons to actually do useful work, that's where the biggest problem is. Because maybe not in government, but in many enterprises where I've talked to, they will tell me that the sort of typical utilization of their data centers may be somewhere between 15 and 25%. 25% is a really good, efficient enterprise in terms of use of the data center resource, which creates this elephant in the room. Yeah? And this elephant in the room is server utilization. Because if you've created the most efficient data center in the world, and you're only utilizing it for 25%, then 75% of your monthly costs are going out of the window. Yeah? And I've heard customers that say, yeah, but we turn these servers off. That's even worse. Yeah? You've really paid for them. Yeah? And so you're not using any electron that is not going to a useful cycle is a lost electron, especially if it's a green one. So, yeah, so if you look at the typical utilization, so this is, typical utilization, that means that all the rest of this capacity is wasted. Yeah, and if you look at what we actually do at Amazon, using these three different payment models. So first of all, we have the reserved utilization. That's sort of the baseline in any of our regions. On top of that, we will load it up with on-demand utilization. And remember, we have hundreds of thousands of businesses using these services concurrently. As you can imagine, there's this whole wide variety in utilization patterns. And so combining all of those, we actually get a pretty uniform usage over time. But it's still not ideal, because there's a significant chunk now and then that is actually not being used. And that is what we sell off on the spot market. Because it's more important for any cycle to be used at, let's say, 1 cent than not to be used at all. Yeah? In this way, we get absolute effective utilization of all of our IT resources. Meaning that this is, a very effective way to go about, and also, probably the most green way to go about. Yeah, so important here is that this also allows us this maximum utilization of our resources. It also means that we can actually get much better utilization that even the largest enterprises can get out of their private use of their data centers. And so next to that, we do quite a bit of innovation, purely focused on actually lowering pricing. Yeah, one of them is that customers came to us and said, well, we love this 11/9 redundancy guarantee that you give with Amazon S3, but you know what? We don't really need it. Yeah, because we can actually recreate those objects because we've got it stored somewhere else, or these are actually results of, for example, a transformation, a video transformation, and so we can recreate those. So why don't you, can't you give us something that is actually much lower cost? So we introduced reduced redundancy storage for Amazon S3, where customers can store that with lower redundancy guarantees at a lower price. So we continue to innovate there. And actually innovation is, I think, the third thing that sets Amazon apart from many other companies. We have a very unique view on innovation. Amazon has as its central motto to be Earth's most customer-centric company. And we believe that we need to be this in the cloud space as well. That means that we will launch services, often in a simple and a humble manner, and then immediately start working with our customers to drive the services in the direction where our customers want this product to go, instead of what our engineers think where this product should go. So if you look at what we've delivered over the past 5 years, I think it's pretty impressive. Yeah, and it at times may seem chaotic. I know we're not this company that actually does these major marketing events in which we will announce all of the things that we will do, because we allow each of our teams to work very closely with their customers. And if they have a new feature ready that customers have asked for, we think that they should put it in the hands of their customers as soon as possible, instead of going for the maximum marketing effect. Yeah, so if you look at just at the past year, yeah, this is what happened in 2010. Yeah, and actually, this is still a summary slide. The only thing that I can promise you for next year is that one slide will not be enough for 2011. Yeah, with that, I'd like to close off with where often I'm being asked, where do you think all of this is going? Yeah. And if I would have 5 years ago would have been able to predict where we are now, well, that would have been pretty amazing, but I couldn't. Yeah? And so the only thing that our vision is, that the vision of how public utility, electricity, changed the world of business, that we hope to be able to play a similar role. This is a picture of a brewery in Belgium at the beginning of the last year, or actually, this is how it looked like at the beginning of the last year. The guy at the back is actually Jeff Bezos. He was not there at the beginning of the last century, but they had 15 people on staff just to look after this generator. Yeah, so there was no public utility, so they had to have a generator. They had 15 people on staff just to generate electricity to brew beer. Yeah? It was obviously not a core competency of the brewery. And the moment that the public utilities came into play, they couldn't quickly enough actually, get onto the public electricity net such that they could actually shift 10 of those people. Now, I think the real number was 12 of those people were shifted into the brewery to actually work on things that really mattered for the brewery. And 2 people were actually left behind to actually manage the public utility electricity as it came into the brewery. So my hope is that we're getting closer to this model, yeah, where we are providing, as cloud providers, compute, storage, databases, networking, as a service, in a way that allows you to continuously innovate and continuously drive your business without having to think about it anymore. That doesn't mean that you won't have any people on staff to actually manage these services and to actually continuously monitor whether we are actually delivering the right capabilities, whether we are delivering the right qualities, whether we are actually meeting our security obligations. That won't change. But where your business units will be able to move at the speed where they really want to, and that these things actually enable your innovation. With that, thank you for your attention. If you guys want to contact me, this is another cloud service, of course, running on top of AWS. That provides you with, removing the last bastion of digital paper that is being exchanged. But with that, thank you very much.